The next topical issue selected is from Deputy Dennis Naughton and Deputies Colm and Keaveney to the Minister for Health the need to reinstate psychiatric beds in St Luke's Acute Unit, Ballinasloe, County Galway. Deputy Naughton, I understand you want to make an initial statement. You're sharing 2 minutes.
Thank you, Deputy Feehan. I want to acknowledge your presence and that of Minister Cannon here in the House. Clearly, I'm calling for a stay to be put on the reconfiguration of mental health services in Galway Roscommon, pending a review of the services available within the wider catchment of the West and the Midland regions. The initial valuation of the acute units in the region is flawed. On the question of is the location adjacent to a major or regional hospital, it was stated that Roscommon was scored as an excellent hospital, which is a level 2 hospital that doesn't have an accident and emergency department and only has minor surgery available. And Portioncula scored below average, even though it's a level 3 hospital with a 24/7 A&E and a 24/7 complex surgery available. Allegedly, the reason for this is because the €3.1 million St Luke's acute psychiatric unit is 3 kilometres from Portioncula Hospital in Ballinasloe. But the HSE is presently spending €5 million upgrading a similar acute unit in St Loman's Hospital in Mullingar, which is 3 kilometres from the level 3 regional hospital in Mullingar. One of the authors of that evaluation, John Meehan, is minuted in a meeting in January of 2011 stating that St Brigid's Hospital is to close. So clearly the report was to endorse the decision, not the other way around. This is not about Roscommon versus Ballinasloe, because at that same meeting in 2011 it was outlined that the long-term plan for the Galway, Roscommon and Mayo mental health catchments was a 50 acute psychiatric beds. Coincidentally, that's what is currently being planned in a new €13 million unit at University Hospital in Galway. This would leave psychiatric patients, neighbours of Deputy Feehan's, 120 kilometres away from their local acute psychiatric unit. The fact is that patients are not at the centre of the plans for reconfiguration. For example, 8 months ago, when a woman lost her life in Roscommon Acute Psychiatric Unit, I was told that there was no 6-bed, high-dependency observation unit vacant in University Hospital Galway. But when management of University Hospital Galway realised last September what was being planned with the closure of St Luke's unit in Ballinasloe, miraculously this 6-bed unit was found and is now being opened. Beds are being found to deliver on the downgrading plans, but not to protect patients, and I would urge you, Minister, to carry out an independent review of the services right across the region.
Thank you.
Minister, this topic arises from me as a consequence of a report in last week's Connacht Tribune that suggested that mental health patients from the East Galway Mental Health Services, who would have been previously directed to St Brigid's, were left on trolleys in an accident and emergency unit in the middle of last week. It appears, going from information given to the local media by the HSE, that patients concerned may have been involved in a self-harm situation. However, that does not change the fundamental principle that it is completely inappropriate for patients to be reporting with mental health incidents and difficulties to be left in an accident and emergency department for any length of time beyond that required for their immediate treatment. In the case of those attending because of self-harm, it is particularly inappropriate because the emergency department is not a ligature-free unit, unlike the inpatient unit in St Brigid's that was only recently upgraded to the cost of €3.1 million to provide for a ligature-free environment. Now, Minister, from my discussions with the frontline staff, and an exercise I think that you have to involve yourself in, I have discovered that in the incident of GUH, there were no psychiatric nurses available to support critically ill people. And I've discovered also that private security firms were there to support general nurses with respect to their admission. Now, issues like this will continue to arise, Minister, and the decision to close a state-of-the-art, only recently refurbished unit in Ballinasloe, Minister, this decision is flawed. GUH psychiatric unit is simply not capable of the workload that's going to be adopted from the East Galway services. And Minister, I think it's important to note that the unit in GUH has been subject to significant criticism from the Mental Health Inspectorate. I call on the Minister to involve herself in commission to a review of the decision to close St. Brigid's.
Minister, you have 4 minutes to reply.
By the way, we're not closing St. Brigid's. We're just changing what goes on there. We're not closing it. I would like to thank the deputies for raising this issue, but I do think that, and I know, I'm going to be very limited to time now, but I do think as well that we need to be very careful about the language we use around mental health and people who find themselves in need of an acute service. And I think people are being reckless with that. I would like to thank the deputies for raising this issue for discussion today. The HSE has on several occasions recently indicated a clear need to modernise mental health services across HSE West, including Galway Roscommon. A key factor in this regard is that the current overall stock of 79 beds in Galway Roscommon is too high, as set out in a Vision for Change, allied to a corresponding underdevelopment of community-based mental health services. In this context, an implementation plan to reconfigure mental health services across the Galway Roscommon administrative area was recently put in place. Phase 1 of this was implemented on the 20th of January last, with the transfer of 5 acute beds from Ballinasloe to the existing acute unit in Galway University Hospital. The initiative now underway is quite simply a rebalancing of a more focused way of available resources and skills towards community-based services. It has not resulted in reduced service levels overall for Galway Roscommon mental health services. The existing Galway University Hospital acute psychiatric unit is currently registered to operate at a higher bed number, so no issue arises with regard to capacity or managing increased bed numbers. Also, the deputies will be aware that a purpose-built 50-bed acute mental health unit will come on stream at Galway University Hospital next year to replace the existing smaller unit. This new facility will consist of 35 general adult mental health beds, with the remaining 15 beds dedicated for psychiatry of later life, eating disorders and mental health and intellectual disability purposes. The acute unit in Roscommon will continue to provide 22 general adult mental health beds. In relation to the 2 cases of patients' care raised, the HSE has indicated that on occasions, and I don't think people actually understand this fully, that on occasions patients may present with coexisting medical emergencies. In such cases, they are examined initially, they are managed initially through an emergency department in line with best practice to ensure that their medical needs are addressed as a priority. The majority of patients admitted to the psychiatric unit in Galway or Roscommon are referred via the community-based mental health teams or directly through their consultant psychiatrists. Very few patients come direct to psychiatric services through an emergency department. Mental health services in the Galway Roscommon area have been enhanced by the recent introduction of a suicide crisis assessment nurse, more commonly known as a SCAN service. This service will help address gaps and provide supports to general practitioners in the area and patients who present to them with thoughts of suicide. Access to the SCAN service is via a single mobile phone number, which gives the GP direct access to the service, allowing for speedy referral and immediate discussion of an individual's case. The HSE is not aware of any recent increase in incidents of self-harm in the catchment area. However, when such cases occur, a community mental health team is available to deal with such incidents, and where necessary, patients can be admitted to GUH or the Department of Psychiatry in Roscommon. The executive points also to a welcome and increasing awareness generally on matters on issues surrounding depression and self-harm, which includes specific measures adopted by local mental health services. In conclusion, I am satisfied that the decision taken by the HSE, based on expert recommendations to enhance future mental health provision across Galway Roscommon, is the best option, taking account of overall service needs and competing resource priorities. The approach and objectives to bring about changes in this case is no different to that undertaken or planned elsewhere to implement a widely agreed policy on improving mental health services. Therefore, all concerned should work together to improve future service provision in this area.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Naughton, you have 1 minute for a supplementary statement.
Thank you, Minister. Minister, I hope in your response you can address some of the questions that I have raised. Just in relation to your response, Minister, you make the point that very few patients come directly to the psychiatric services via the emergency department. I can tell you that that's not the case in relation to Portiuncula, where a substantial number of people have come through the emergency department, and Minister Cannon would be aware of that evidence as well. Minister, can I put a hypothetical situation to you? And I think this highlights, the flaws in relation to what's going on, not just in our own catchment, but across the country. Take a woman from Baylaw on the Connaught side of the town of Athlone. She gives birth to a baby in the local maternity hospital up the road, which is Portiuncula Hospital. The baby has serious complications and cannot go home with the mother. And because of that separation of mother and baby, that mother has and experiences postnatal depression, and it's not uncommon. But instead of that woman being treated beside her baby in Ballinasloe, she has to go 70 miles away to St. Loman's Hospital in Mullingar. Minister, if I cut my finger here today, I can go over to St. James's Hospital and have it sutured. But if I'm a harm to myself or someone else in this house, I have to be transported to the acute psychiatric unit in Roscommon Town, because that's my designated unit. And the question I have, Minister, is why is mental illness not being treated the same as physical illness? St. Luke's unit in Ballinasloe is the most modern in the country. It cannot provide a service to patients within its own local catchment. So much for treating the patient as close as possible to their own home. Would it not make far more sense to put mental health on an equal footing with physical health and allow for the similar catchments that we have for accident emergencies for the accident emergency of the mental health services, which is the acute psychiatric units? Thank you.
Deputy Keaveney.
I observe with great interest the Minister's caution around language when it comes to the issue of mental health. I also noticed the absence of a wholesome response to the substantive questions that have been raised here today. Minister, to focus back again on the evaluation that facilitated the political decision to accelerate this type of reform. Minister, could you share with the House, are you prepared to stand over the objectivity, the professional input, and would you share with the House particularly the timelines of that criteria in terms of the evaluation? Minister, I'm of a firm belief that that evaluation took place significantly earlier than the justification to apply the matrix that was used by the consultants associated with it. Furthermore, Minister, could we deal with the issue of staffing in your response? Under the Vision for Change, there is a provision for 97 staff to be provided for the facilitation of this change across the region. Now, Minister, to date there are only 37 staff in situ. You are accelerating this reform, accelerating this change. What we would argue is based on flawed criteria. I would be grateful for your comment on that. But you don't have the staff on the ground. You simply don't have the staff to facilitate this organisational change. We both want to support the Vision for Change. But the ethos for that change was that you would have the composition of the community-based teams in place before the scale of this change would have happened. It simply isn't there.
Thank you. Minister to reply.
To start with, Deputy Naughton, within any new unit that will be built, there will be no separation of mothers and babies. Any woman that suffers from postnatal depression, the plan is that there will be a bed available for both the mother and the baby. All modern thinking tells you that there should be no separation, and so that's not. But that is what's going to happen. Could I just reply as well in terms of what happened? What happened to treating the patient as close to home as possible? What we're doing is ensure that they will be treated at home, not as close as possible, at home. And the community mental health teams will call every morning, every afternoon, every evening, and they do so in my own area. That's how I know about it, and that's what's going to happen. So to those two questions, that's That's the acute phase. The acute phase. It's during the acute phase that this happens. I mean, that's what happens in Cork North Central. That's what happens in Tipperary. That's what happens where this has been rolled out. And this is not something that has been done without history to back it up and without practice to back it up. It is all there. Could I just say, I don't understand why you think there are only 10% in place. Of the 44 teams, 32 are in place. Of the 44 teams, 32 are in place. So I don't understand that. In terms of what is necessary of additional staff, Deputy Keaveney, to implement this, 64 was the business case that was made, and 64 is what was allocated. We have almost all of them in place, and the rest are being recruited. That's the business case that was made to us, and that is what we're doing. And as a matter of fact, and I don't have the information there in front of me, but I've gone over this so many times in relation to Ballinasloe, and I don't mind doing that. I really don't mind doing it, because I went through it in terms of Clonmel, and I'm going to go through it now in terms of a certain part of Cork, and it's going to be all of the same argument. How was the assessment done? What was the analysis? What was the outcome? Yes, I do stand over the conclusion of the expert group, because I've spoken to them time and time and time again. Quite recently again, I spoke to them in Stewart's Hospital, one of them in Stewart's Hospital, 3 weeks ago, and again went over all of this. Yes, I do stand over it. It is...
observations that concern you, that one of the consultants was limited.
No, they don't concern me, because I know the consultant and because I've face to face, I've asked him about these things. And he is a man that I consider to be of the highest possible integrity, and someone that desperately wants to give the best possible service to people in the community. And I don't understand. I don't understand. I genuinely don't understand. And I understand the politics of it. I do understand the politics of it. But I do not understand how anyone could possibly justify keeping people in an institution when there is a better way to ensure they have a better life.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister Lynch.
No, could I just address that point, please, Chair? Could I just address that point, please, Chair? The most recent report from the Mental Health Commission is an excellent report, and as soon as I have it, well, that's, you see, you... Well, that's right. And could I just say, Chair, that the one you have is clearly the one you're going to cling to like a life raft.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister Lynch.
No.
Thank you. Thank you. That concludes.